I've been writing songs for probably more than 50 years now, and I have been a professional musician and songwriter and playwright and producer and storyteller, I suppose, for the last 40 years. I have made my living from my songs and from my stories. So it started for me as a teenager. I started, I suppose, with the usual sort of aspirations of wanting to be like, people I heard on the radio. And remember, we didn't have television in those days. There was no television when I started. I think for me what happened was that I started learning to play the guitar and wanting to write songs, my own songs. But at that point, being about 18 years old, I was still very influenced by what I was hearing from overseas and trying to, sort of emulate that and copy that until I went overseas. I was very fortunate to be able to study at Leeds University in England. And I went over there with my guitar and I started to perform in the folk clubs in Leeds. And I very quickly realized that, I wasn't English. Even I thought, I was an English-speaking South African, but I suddenly realized I'm not English. I'm very different to these people, and I will never be them. I will never be one of the Rolling Stones or, whatever, or folk singers that were popular like Cat Stevens at that time. And suddenly here I was, trying to do those kind of songs in front of a British audience, and feeling quite silly and stupid about that. So I immediately started to think, well, let me present some of my own songs about my own experience about being a South African during the apartheid years. So you must remember, I'm singing to a very hostile audience. At that time, the politics were very hostile towards South Africa, and being what I suppose was considered to be a white South African, I started to use humor and satire to kind of connect to my audience. I took the piss out of myself, and I took the piss out of what was happening in South Africa and so on, and I started to make people laugh. And I realized for the first time that I could do that. I could make people laugh, and I could use satire to my advantage. And I realized that by using my difference, because I was different, and because I started to believe in telling my own story. And I think that has been the most important thing that I ever learned, was to do that. And so while I was in England, I started to write all these songs, and I started to perform to, as I say, to audiences that had no real connection to my background or to my story. And then when I came back to South Africa in the early 70s, I started performing here in Cape Town at the Folk Club, and nobody had ever heard anything like this before. And I very quickly developed a kind of a cult following because I was doing something that was very, very unusual, very different. I was doing political satire, sort of social commentary, making people aware of the sort of social and political conditions, and at the same time making them laugh at themselves. I had no aspirations to become a recording artist. I had no illusions that I would be played on the radio at that point. I knew that my songs were totally unacceptable to SABC, which was the main radio broadcast, national broadcast at that time, or any of the other smaller stations, if there were any. And so I developed this sort of cult following in Cape Town and Stellenbosch I played at the universities like Stellenbosch, Cape Town, UCT, and even I went to play in Pretoria University where they applied for a permit because they thought I was colored. So they applied for a permit so that I could perform there. Because they just heard me singing, that's all. And so I thought, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to make a record. And that's what that word means. You know, we were making vinyl records in those years. And I wanted to record what I was doing in the 1970s, late 1970s. So that when I stood here at my age today, I would have this record of what I did then. And I could show my grandchildren that, you know, Opa, he sang these songs in the 70s, you know. That was really what I set out to do. And so I took some of my own money and I started to record. I did a live recording of some of my songs at the Barleycorn Folk Club. And then I was approached by Paddy Lee Thorpe from Mountain Records. And he said he'd just opened up started a new label in Cape Town called Mountain Records, and it's going to be distributed through EMI and so on. And he'd like to sign me as an artist. And so I got into a very unusual situation whereby I invested in my own product. 50% of the investment was mine, 50% was Mountain Records, and I was signed to the label. And we recorded my first album, Bakgat, which was immediately banned by the SABC, which didn't surprise me at all because I never thought my songs were going to be played on the radio. But what EMI couldn't understand was that this album was selling so fast. The album was flying out of the shops, but it was getting no radio play whatsoever. And so they flew me up to Joburg, and they said I must perform at the Chelsea Hotel, which I did. And the very next night, people were queuing around the block to come and see me and trying to get into the Chelsea Hotel to hear me perform. And the record company couldn't quite understand what was going on. Why was this happening? This just wasn't the way you did it, you know. And they said to me, don't you have a song that we can record that will get played on the radio? I said, yeah, I've written this song about an old rugby player, let's record that. And then I've got this one about, saying about the money in the Royal Hotel. That I'm sure they'd play that, you know. These songs weren't on the album. So I went in and recorded Hakom Blokkies, and when that was released, it went up to number 1 on the SABC charts, and it stayed there for weeks on end. And suddenly, I was selling gold, and and then it just suddenly my life changed very, very, very quickly. I was kind of exposed to the nation. I became very, very well known, and I released a succession of albums, and they all went gold and platinum, and I sold hundreds and hundreds of thousands of records, and I was touring all over the country and making quite a lot of money. I all the time up until this, I'd been working for a textile company. I was a textile designer, and so my wife, who's here today, persuaded me to give up my career and let's try being a sort of a musician for at least a year, 1 year. Well, that was 40 years ago. All right, I don't think I've got that much time, and I realize I'm giving you too much of the story. But so what happened was my whole thing was to try and find a South African identity. I think that was what my goal was, to tell my own story. And everything I did was kind of in sort of a fight against, in a sense, cultural colonialism, the Americanization of our culture, or the way I'd grown up, pop music and rock music and so on. It all came from Britain or from America, and that's what everyone aspired to. And I went in the different direction. I just said, well, as I said to you, because of my experience, that's not me. I'm not going to be that. I'm never going to be part of that thing. I'm just going to be me. And so I didn't want to look like some kind of Californian hippie, which I did look like at one point. I had long hair and, t-shirt and jeans and shit like that. And then one evening I had a bath, and I got out of the bath and my hair was all wet and back. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and it looked like an old photograph of my uncles when they had their hair oiled back. And I thought, you'd have to be very brave to wear your hair like that. And so I went to the barber, and I had my hair all cut off, and I got a whole lot of Brill cream, and I Brill creamed my hair back with the middle parting. And I started to develop an image that felt more comfortable to me. And I started wearing very baggy khaki pants and velskoene, and the red velskoens I introduced in the early 80s. It was, the idea there was like, let's take a very well-known, like Elvis had sung the song about blue suede shoes. And I thought, well, what would that be for me? And I thought, okay, it would be like rooi velskoene, red velskoens. And that became my image. And I wasn't trying to brand myself or anything. I was just doing it. I just wanted to be me. And not an American, or I didn't want to be a clone of anyone else. And my songs were like that. Essentially, my songs are about people, characters, and about places and so on. And I started to realize that I like to write stories. So I write story songs. I don't write pop music, or that's not what I do. And then, so from 1981 until 1986, 5 years I was in what you guys call the music industry. I'm not sure if there is such a thing, but anyway. I don't know. It's just a loose collection of exploitative people, but anyway. So for 5 years, I released an album virtually every 9 months or so. I was writing, recording, and touring and performing to very diverse audiences. And I burnt out. I just burnt out. By 1986, I couldn't take it anymore. And the politics of this country were really terrible. We had gone into a state of emergency. I was Amal Sapel. I was the darling of the Afrikaans white establishment, and yet I was also the darling of the left-wing UCT campus. And, I was having a bit of a sort of schizophrenic moment, let me say that. I wasn't, I thought I was trying to find out who I was, and my success was pulling me into areas that I'd never anticipated. And I decided in 1986 to stop. And what I wanted to do was explore the idea of writing musical. And my idea was to write a musical about District 6, because it was a political story, and because it had a whole lot of cultural aspects to it, the music and so on. But I understood that I also couldn't do that on my own, and that I would need to write it with someone from District 6. And I joined up with an old friend of mine, a musician friend of mine, Tally Peterson, and we started to explore the idea of writing a musical together. He was very interested in also writing musical for the theatre, although he was a performing musician. And so we found that our strengths were great. We had different strengths. My strength was words, writing lyrics, and telling stories and writing the story part. And Talib's skill was was playing the music, writing the melodies, doing the arrangements, and so on. And we just embarked, again, self-financed. We embarked on this. The next few months, we wrote District 6, the musical, and we got the Baxter to agree to produce it. But what I did was I invested money into that musical to make it happen. And so I was a financial partner in the musical. And when it came on to the stage, it exploded. It was a phenomenal success here in Cape Town and then in the rest of the country, and even went to Scotland. And because of its success, I was able to bring Tally Peterson in financially, and he became a co-producer with my wife and I on District 6, the musical. And so what happened then was we were able to take our success, our financial success, and create the next musical, which was Fairyland. And that was also a success. And then we went on to create the next musical, which was Poison. And then we went on to do Poison. And from Poison, which went to Malaysia, coming back from Malaysia, we wrote Cat and the Kings. And again, very unexpectedly, Cat and the Kings was invited to go and perform at a theatre in London called the Tricycle Theatre. And it's sort of, sometimes things happen, sometimes you're lucky, you know, you have to be smart, but you can't make certain things happen. Certain things just sort of fall into place at the right time. And the Tricycle Theatre happened to be looking for a small musical which would take them through 6 weeks over Christmas, because they'd had a cancellation. And Tally musical, Cat and the Kings, was a 6-hander. It was very small, and it was very cost-effective to bring a small musical like that to London. And we got to London, and within a few days, the West End producers were knocking at the door saying, "We want this to go onto the West End." Wasn't our intention. And we then took Cat and the Kings to the West End, and in 1999, it won the Olivier Award for the best musical in London on the West End. Thanks very much.
Applause for water.
Which attracted the interest of the Broadway producers, and Broadway producers came over to have a look at it. And we eventually got to Broadway with Cat and the Kings, and we ran for 6 months on Broadway with Cat and the Kings, which in itself is an achievement, because if shows don't work on Broadway, they close within a day or two. But we were sort of, again, exhausted at that point. What do I want to say about so suddenly I was moving in a completely different direction, and that direction was the musical theatre, and it's where I have had my biggest successes, let's say that. And I've been with musical theatre since 1986 up until now. And what I'm busy with right now is I'm doing a new production at the Baxter Theatre, which is called Danger in the Dark. And it's a reworking of the musical Poison that Talib and I wrote in the 1990s. It was first staged in 1992. And Poison was about gangsterism and drug abuse on the Cape Flats. And so I was approached recently by the Baxter Theatre to say, could they please do Poison? And I said, I would like to use this opportunity to rework that musical. And fix some of the things that I think we didn't quite get right in the original productions. And so I've used that opportunity now to rewrite it. And unfortunately, as you know, Talib is no longer with us. But I'm using all of his music, and I've rewritten it from a female perspective. A young woman, a young social worker, discovers that her friend who ran away from school has got involved with a drug lord, and is in an abusive relationship. And her quest is to try and save her from this abusive relationship. And she comes up against the drug dealers, and she tries to rally the community, as we've seen happen here in Cape Town and is happening right now. So Danger in the Dark is very relevant for these times. And I realize that's quite an important point. You've got to be intuitive. You've got to be intuitive, and you've got to be doing stuff that sort of speaks to its time. You know, when we did District 6 in the 1980s, the time was right. The time was right. The District 6 had been declared white in 1966. 20 years had gone by. The place had been destroyed, razed to the ground. And in some ways, a kind of a forgotten issue. But the pain of District 6 was still in the community's hearts. And when we brought that musical on stage and we told that story, the community was able to, they saw themselves, they identified with that, and they responded. You couldn't believe it. District 6, the reaction to District 6, the musical, had never been seen in this country before, and probably hasn't been seen again. People used to sleep outside the theatre like a rugby match to try and get tickets the next morning. People used to queue down right into Rondebosch to when a new season opened. At the end, when we finally closed it, 350,000 people bought tickets to see District 6, the musical. That is, just to get your head around it, if you go to Newlands takes about 50,000 people, right, when it's packed? Well, that's about 7-8 times Newlands packed. That's what that musical, what I'm just trying to say, we didn't just then take that money and sort of say, okay, well, let's go and, relax on a beach in Mauritius or somewhere like that. And we did the next musical, Fairyland, and we opened a small theatre at the waterfront called Dock Road, and we did this production, Fairyland, which was celebrating the culture of District 6, Talib and I. And that ran for over 1,500 performances and was seen by 300,000 people. So the success was enormous, and I don't think that, because the theatre industry isn't quite like the music industry, where when you sell 20,000 albums, you get a gold record, It's different here. You sell, with theatre, you sell tickets. And it's and I think over the years, if I have to count, I've probably sold 2 million tickets. But you wouldn't know that. So audiences are very important. And I think in this day and age, I said to Sipa, I don't understand the new sort of digital distribution and marketing and so on. And even though my music is streaming, and I get a piffling royalty from streaming, it's not an answer, and it's not an alternative to the way it used to be. And even in those days, artists were. It's always a kind of a really exploitative relationship in those days between the record companies and the artists. But now today, there isn't even a company that you related to. They take your music and they stream it and they pay you 0.006 of an American cent. And who decided that? You weren't asked if that's okay with you. You just have to accept it. So the exploitative nature of the industry is still there. It's probably much worse today than it used to be, because there's no one to turn to and say, listen, fund my next album or whatever, which the old companies used to do. Anyway, that's beside the point. What I want, my point is that you need to, you need to develop audiences in the sense you need to play. If you're making music, you need to put yourself out in front of people and play and find the people who like what you're doing, you know, and encourage those people to become your audience. Because it's only really through live performance these days that you are going to make money and that you are going to grow your base. I don't know else, but anyway, you guys discussed this stuff at Music Exchange, so maybe Martin and all the other guys will be able to guide you on that one. But my thing has always been with audiences and getting audiences to respond to what you're doing. And I never try and second guess audiences. What I've always done is just been intuitive and followed what interests me. And listened to the reaction of the audiences when I put that music in front of them. Because what music does is it has to work emotionally. Everything you do has to have an emotional connection with your audience. Okay, some music is just, there's different kinds of music, but you know, some music just for dancing maybe, but it's still a kind of an emotional experience. But a lot of the time, if you've got content in your songs, you want to find that emotional connection. And a lot of stuff is about the pain of love and so on, but it can also be a humorous emotion. The emotion of laughter is one which has worked very well for me over the years. I've not written many love songs. I'm happy. So I've been kind of just talking of, so the role I play today is very much as a storyteller in the theatre, using music to tell stories. And to make that emotional connection with audiences. And as Sipo and Martin has said, over the years, since the 80s, Talib and I always believed in trying to create opportunities for young people, to bring them in as actors, as dancers, as singers, to nurture them. And we've had some great successes. Some of our kids that started like Emo and Lukman and Alistair Isabel and Jodie, they started with us when they were 9, 10 years old in District 6, and they've gone on to make huge careers for themselves in the entertainment industry. And right to this day, you know, I'm still trying to do that, even with Danger in the Dark. I've got a lot of professional artists working in the main roles, but then we're giving opportunities to young dancers to come in, young people that this is their first theatre experience, to work professionally and so on. So all that is, you know, I think one has to try and pay back in that kind of way. You get seduced by the image of some star out there and you think, I can do that. I've got a voice. I can sing. In fact, I sing better than that person, you know? Yes, maybe you do. But you want to do it on your own terms. You need to find your own identity and your point of difference. So know what your strengths are and know what your weaknesses are, and work on your strengths and eliminate your weaknesses. Okay. And you must explore. You must explore your experience and what has been traumatic to you, or even whatever has been emotional to you, you should explore very honestly, and you bring that out in your work. It's that exploration that makes you different, because each one of you does have a different story. Each one of you has been through life in a different way. And don't be too desperate to succeed and lose your vision. When they start dangling money in front of you and saying, but now we want you to change, you know, for this money. We want you, now we think you should be doing this, this, and that. Be careful that you don't lose sight of your vision for yourself. Don't be too desperate. Learn to be able to negotiate intelligently. And remain curious. Keep learning. It's the one thing I'm trying to do at my age now, is to keep learning something new all the time. You know, that's, you've got to, you can't just stay with what you've done and what you've been doing and your successes and so on. You know, you might win awards and these things, but it's nice, it's great, but put them away in your cupboard and move on and do something new after that. Don't polish that award every night thinking I'm great. So if you can, invest in yourself, because you are investing in yourself. You're investing your time and your money to make, whatever. But invest in yourself and know that you're investing in yourself. And so when it comes to negotiating, negotiate intelligently. Both sides want to come out win-win. You don't have to be Donald Trump and make someone else lose so that you can win. His philosophy is, I can't be a winner unless the other guy didn't lose. He has to lose, then I win. No, you can both win. It's a win-win situation that you have to go for. All right, and then my advice to you is understand what is unique about yourself. Understand that uniqueness and your skills. Understand what your skill set is and how you can improve on that skill set. Develop your point of difference. Be intuitive and intelligent and find your audience and understand what it is that makes them connect emotionally to you. In my case, I started to understand that they responded to me by laughing. I didn't know it was funny until I stood up in front of an audience with a guitar and started just talking about who I was, and people thought it was funny, that I was being honest, that I came from this small town and we did kind of weird things when I grew up, and that was extremely funny to them. And I understood that my connection to them was through humor. And so I wrote more songs like that. I started to do, and I developed a whole thing so people came to hear what I was doing. And it wasn't just, it was kind of, I was doing a kind of stand-up comedy at the time, before stand-up was around. There was no stand-up comedy scene like there is today. And I was telling these stories in a stand-up comedic way, and I was playing songs in between. Some of them sort of quite serious about political conditions, and others very satirical and making people laugh and cry at the same time. And that's what I've continued to do with musicals, make people laugh and cry. Yeah, and so just stay curious, develop your skills, and then I heard, hope. Don't lose hope. It can be tough, and sometimes the dice falls right for you, and you get lucky. But when the door opens, be ready to go through it. Be ready. Don't wait for the door to open and then say, hang on, let me just go and practice. Too late. Develop your skills. Learn. Be on top of your game. The door might never open, but if it opens, be ready to walk through it and present yourself to a waiting world. Thank you.